Here's a question nobody in Moscow wants to answer. If Russia's entire war strategy depends on flooding Ukraine with soldiers, what happens when the soldiers stop arriving? Something is killing them before they fire a single shot. Russia's own military analysts are now admitting it openly. 80 to 90% of Russian personnel losses are happening at the stage of simply advancing toward the front. Not on it, not past it, on the way to it. 8 or 9 out of every 10 Russian soldiers sent forward are dying in transit. That is not a war. That is a conveyor belt pointed at a meat grinder, and Russia has absolutely no idea how to turn it off. Let's start with the man who said the quiet part loud. Yuri Kotenok is a Russian war correspondent and military blogger, pro-war, pro-Kremlin. Not exactly the type of person you'd expect to publish devastating assessments of Russia's military performance. And yet in recent months, Kotenok looked at the data coming out of the front and published something that should have been front-page news everywhere. His words: consider these figures. 80 to 90% of personnel losses occur already at the stage of advancing toward the line of contact. 8 or 9 out of 10 soldiers, an average of 85%, are killed on the way without ever engaging the enemy or even seeing them. Let that sit for a second. Russia's entire strategic logic for this war is manpower. Throw enough bodies at Ukraine and eventually Ukraine breaks. That's the plan. That has always been the plan. The problem is the plan only works if the bodies actually arrive. And right now, most of them aren't. Here's what this looks like in real numbers. In March 2026, Russia suffered 35,351 confirmed casualties in a single month, a record high. Apply Kotenok's 85% figure, and roughly 30,000 of those soldiers never saw the front line. They died before they got there. That left Russia with approximately 5,000 soldiers who actually made it into combat positions during its own spring offensive. 5,000 out of 35,000. Russia spent an entire month's worth of casualties to put 5,000 effective fighters on the line. And those 5,000, to nobody's surprise, made essentially zero progress. To understand why so many Russian soldiers are dying before they arrive, you need to understand what Ukraine has done to the geography of this war. In 2022, FPV drones could fly roughly 5 to 7 kilometers from their launch point. That was your kill zone, a strip of dangerous ground a few miles wide that Russian soldiers had to cross before reaching Ukrainian defensive positions. Brutal, but crossable. Russia took losses doing it, but kept moving. By 2025, that strip had expanded to 15 kilometers. That's 9 miles of drone-infested terrain that every Russian soldier has to survive before they're even in combat range of the enemy. Most don't. But here's where it gets genuinely unhinged. Ukraine didn't stop at 15 kilometers. It developed medium-range strike drones that operate up to 144 kilometers, 90 miles, behind the front line, 90 miles. Russia's entire logistical rear, troop staging areas, supply convoys, command posts, ammunition depots, now sits inside Ukrainian drone range. So Russia doesn't just have a kill zone anymore. It has a kill region. Soldiers die on the way to the front. Supplies get destroyed before they reach units. Commanders get struck in positions they thought were safe. And reconnaissance drones fly so high above everything that Russian soldiers can't even see them watching. LRT described it plainly. There is no longer a clear front line for Russian soldiers to reach in much of Ukraine. The front line is wherever Ukraine's drones are, which is everywhere. Russia launched a spring offensive in March 2026. The goal was Donetsk. The result was a masterclass in how to hemorrhage soldiers for no return. Let's look at one specific incident because the numbers are almost comedic in how bad they are. On the Lyman-Borova axis, Russia attempted what it described as a major breakthrough. They sent in over 500 infantrymen, 28 armored vehicles, more than 100 motorcycles, buggies, and ATVs, a proper assault package by Russia's current standards. Within a single day, 405 of those troops were destroyed, 84 motorcycles gone, 11 armored vehicles hit, 3 tanks, a TOS Solntsepyak heavy flamethrower system, which costs roughly $6 million, taken out. Over 160 Russian drones intercepted on top of all that. They didn't reach the line of contact, not even close. Over 3 days of the spring offensive's most intense push, Russia lost approximately 5,000 soldiers soldiers killed and wounded. To put that in context, Russia can recruit around 35,000 troops per month. In 3 days of offensive operations, Russia burned through what it takes a full week to replace, and it gained nothing. By the end of March, Russia's frontline gains for the entire month were essentially zero. The first time in 2.5 years that Russia recorded no meaningful advance. Ukraine, meanwhile, gained 9 square kilometers of territory. Without losing anywhere near the casualties Russia burned through to sit still. CSIS put the cost of Russia's creeping advance into historical perspective. Russian forces advanced an average of 70 meters per day over 2 years, pushing toward Pokrovsk. That is slower than Allied forces in the Battle of the Somme in World War I. One of the bloodiest battles in human history, fought with bolt-action rifles and horse cavalry, moved faster than Putin's modern military. Here's where the story takes a turn that would be darkly funny if it weren't so grim. Ukraine's kill zones are responsible for the majority of Russia's pre-frontline losses, but Ukraine isn't the only thing killing Russian soldiers before they arrive. Russia is doing a portion of that job itself. Start with desertions. By late 2025, up to 70,000 Russian soldiers were expected to abandon their units before the year was out. 1 in 10 of Russia's contingent in Ukraine gone. Not killed by drones, not captured, just gone. Some vanished from their positions mid-battle. Others failed to return from medical leave. Some took military vehicles with them on the way out. Ukraine's intelligence documented more than 30 incidents of desertion involving weapons or equipment. One soldier apparently drove off in an armored vehicle, which suggests a very specific kind of commitment to not going back. Russia's response to desertion is not, as you might hope, addressing the conditions that cause it. It is executing people. Investigators from the outlet Verska compiled a database of over 100 Russian soldiers accused of carrying out what the Russian military calls zeroings out, field executions of fellow soldiers who refused to advance into kill zones. These aren't isolated incidents. Verska found 12,000 complaints related to killings within the ranks filed with Russia's main military prosecutor's office since the start of the full-scale invasion. Soldiers refusing to go into drone-infested territory were being beaten, tortured with electric shock devices, shot and buried in forests. Their deaths listed officially as missing in action, so families receive no compensation. One soldier named Alexei described watching comrades get executed at point-blank range for refusing meat assaults, Russia's term for frontal attacks through kill zones with no air cover and no realistic chance of survival. His words, "You're not actually going to reach those positions. They'll just tear you apart with drones." That's why people refuse. And then there are suicides. Ukraine's defense minister noted in March 2026 that Russian soldiers were killing themselves en masse at the front. The Ukrainian military briefly, and with genuinely unsettling bureaucratic energy, discussed whether units should be awarded combat points for confirmed enemy suicides in their zone of responsibility. They decided it might be worth it, subject to video confirmation. For the soldiers who do make it through the kill zones, there is a final humiliation waiting. Ukraine's partisan group Atesh reported that Russian soldiers on the front are increasingly being issued Soviet-era AKM and AK-74 rifles from the 1960s and 1970s, poorly maintained, prone to jamming. In a battlefield environment dominated by electronics, AI-guided drones, and precision munitions, Russia is handing its soldiers rifles that were designed before the moon landing. One Russian military blogger, Alexei Sukankin, described commanders treating newly arrived recruits as a renewable resource, an old-fashioned way of doing things where the assumption is that if you send enough people through the grinder, some of them will stick. Another blogger, Alexander Khodakovsky, made a calculation that should terrify Russian military planners. He said returning to the large armored assaults of 2022, even if Russia had the equipment, would increase losses eightfold with no meaningful impact on the front line. so Russia can't assault the way it used to. Its current infiltration tactics are getting 85 to 90% of its soldiers killed before they arrive. And the soldiers who do arrive are carrying rifles their grandfathers used to fight in Afghanistan. Russia is feeding a modern drone war with Cold War equipment and calling it a strategy. Here is the calculation that Ukraine is quietly running. Russia is recruiting approximately 30,000 to 40,000 soldiers per month. In the first quarter of 2026, Ukraine's I Want to Live initiative, which handles surrender communications and monitors Russian recruitment patterns, assessed that Russia was only signing up around 940 soldiers per day. That's a recruitment shortfall of around 65,000 for the year if it holds. Meanwhile, Russia's casualty rate is moving in the wrong direction. March 2026 saw 35,351 casualties, a record. Ukraine's stated goal is to push that number to 50,000 per month. That's not a wish, it's a calculation. At 50,000 casualties a month against 30,000 to 35,000 recruits, Russia's manpower base begins visibly collapsing. The deficit compounds. The front line, over 1,000 kilometers long, starts thinning. And 96% of those casualties are being caused by drones. Not artillery, not infantry, drones. Kotenok's second bombshell, the one that didn't get nearly enough coverage, was this. At the current rate of tactical movement, measuring advances in hundreds of meters per day, the war would last 100 years. His words, not mine. The Russian military analyst who watches this war every day, who is paid to be optimistic about Russia's chances, looked at the numbers and concluded that at this pace, the war ends sometime around the year 2126. Putin cannot wait a century. So let's talk about the survivors, the ones who made it through 90 miles of drone territory, didn't desert, didn't get shot by their own commanders for hesitating, somehow threaded the needle between Ukrainian FPV drones and Russian field executions, and came out the other side still breathing. What did they find? Ukraine's fortress belt. 4 cities, Sloviansk, Kramatorsk, Drushkivka, Kostiantynivka, fortified continuously since 2014. 11 years of fighting positions, minefields, anti-vehicle obstacles, and hardened urban defenses sitting on elevated ground above the flat corridors Russia has to cross. Ukrainian drone operators on those heights watching every approach route below them. ISW says Russia won't take it in 2026. Their most optimistic projection, more manpower, better equipment, fewer losses in transit, puts a breakthrough at late 2027 at the absolute earliest. For context, capturing Pokrovsk, a town of 60,000 people, took Russia nearly 2 years. The fortress belt cities had 380,000 before the war. To compensate for losses fast enough to keep attacking, Russia cut basic training for assault personnel from 1 month to 1 week. 7 days of preparation before walking into the most fortified defensive line in modern Europe. 316 casualties per square kilometer in Q1 2026. That number hits differently now, because you understand what each of those casualties survived just to be in a position to become one. 90 miles of drones behind them, Soviet rifles in their hands, 7 days of training in their heads, 11 years of concrete fortifications in front of them. The lucky 10% made it through. Then they found out what was waiting. The reason Russia keeps burning soldiers in kill zones it cannot cross is not stupidity. Though there is some of that, it's structural. Russia's commanders are ordered to push, always push. The Kremlin's demand for forward movement means that stopping to solve the drone problem is not an option. You push or you get replaced. You push or you get executed. The incentive structure of Putin's military runs entirely on forward motion, regardless of cost. ISW called it a vicious loop. And it is. Russia can't stop to fix the drone problem because stopping means not attacking. And not attacking means someone gets replaced or shot, so they keep attacking. And the drones keep working. Maneuver warfare, the kind that could actually break through Ukraine's defenses, requires preparation, space, and coordination, none of which Russia has while it's being told to attack tomorrow. Ukraine is producing more strike drones than Russia. It's fielding AI-guided systems that lock onto targets without a human operator in the loop. The furthest a Ukrainian drone has traveled to hit a target is now 1,750 kilometers from Ukraine's border. The kill zone is not staying still. It is growing. Every month, more of Russia's operational depth becomes a place where soldiers die on their way to somewhere else. Russia's strategy was always simple. Flood Ukraine with soldiers, absorb losses, outlast the defense. It was a brutal plan. It was not a stupid plan. For a country with Russia's population and industrial base, an attritional war of manpower should theoretically be winnable. The problem is that the plan requires the manpower to actually arrive. 8 or 9 out of 10 aren't making it. The ones who don't desert get executed by their own officers for refusing to walk into drone corridors. The ones who do walk in mostly don't come out. The ones who survive the kill zones arrive with rifles from the Brezhnev era and no ammunition resupply because the logistics convoy got hit somewhere in the 90-mile rear zone. Russia lost more soldiers in 2025 than the entire active military of the United Kingdom. It gained less than 1% of Ukraine doing it, and 2026 is worse. Kotenok, the Russian who said it best, looked at everything his country is doing and concluded the war could run for 100 years at this pace. Putin launched this war expecting it to be over in 3 days. He's now being told by his own people it might take a century. The kill zone doesn't care about either timeline. It just keeps working.